we do have Ruthe. And this is pretty awesome to have Ruthe here with us. We talk about homegrown, we talk about those at the top of the food chain that have launched from Oregon, and Ruthe is one of those, and you see her bio here, and I can read it, but I took up Ivan's time by reading part of his. Ruthe, I don't know. Do you want to read yours? You all want to read Ruth's. It's extremely impressive. For us to have Ruthe here from the office of the White House and of Science and Technology, and have her share her dream and ideas for what could happen nationwide. We're very privileged to have her, but she herself is a Champion of Change recipient, and she may reflect on some of that. So we're impressed. We're going to give you all the time possible, Ruthe.
Is there a secret to this microphone that we've established? Don't cover up the antenna at the bottom. Okay, great. So while we're having the tech team set up the laptop here, I will caveat that this is the first time I've attempted to set up a White House issue laptop on anyone else's machines. So there's significant things you are not able to do with White House machinery, which I have learned in the last month. It's very interesting. Never send me a doodle poll, by the way, because I can't open it. So anyway, I do have a very, very long Oregon history, and I grew up in Oregon. I went to high school at State and Union High, which I often compare with the movie Footloose, and very, very small high school, about 600 students, and went to Lewis and Clark College, graduated from Lewis and Clark. They happen to be having their reunion weekend this weekend, and I'm on their board of alumni, or at least I was, and so I'm going to stop by there. But interestingly enough, my entire journey in anything related to STEM started right here when I took a position at Girl Scouts of what was at the time Columbia River Council. And Wells is wearing the very first Girl Scouts robotics team, first year of ORTOP fleece vest that we got Columbia Sportswear to donate for all the girls, because we wanted to make it clear to everyone at that first time event that they looked out and they saw a sea of girls. This was not a boys event that we needed to add girls to. This was an event for boys and girls, and that was from day one, and ORTOP has done a great job of that ever since. So there's a lot of people here who've known me for a long, long time, and for those of you that were the origins of ORTOP, we're going to take a little photo at the end. But the first thing I want to do is I always tweet all my audiences, and you guys have all been sitting, so everybody stand up. Okay, so I'm going to put the microphone down for this, but we're going to do a wave with a pano. So that means you got to like wave, okay, and go with the phone, and you know, some excitement here because I have a lot of Twitter followers, so you will look really foolish. So. We can do a practice one. Okay, that's a good idea. Okay, so rehearsal. Okay, so we're going to start here, and I want to see. You know, okay. So this will be the practice piano. Okay, ready? Go. Excitement! Okay, we don't have to do that again because you did really well. Okay, so as was mentioned, there are, Oregon has been a leader for a long time. So Oregon was the first Girl Scout Council to have robotics. And for those of you that mentioned the Girls Collaborative Project back in 2001 or something, what was then the Pacific Northwest Girls Collaborative gave a grant to Bruce and I that launched Lego Robotics in Girl Scouts day camps, and Kathy and Joe were hired to create the curriculum for that. I mean, it goes way, way back. She wrote the grant. We've had this fun, fantastic, long-time partnership, and it's just cool to see so many. We have champions of change from Oregon, Beth, Dina from over in Vancouver, and then this last week, John Ebergall from Sherwood High School was named a champion of change for making, and really, really fantastic leadership from Oregon. And so I'm excited to be here because I think Oregon CSTA is the first CSTA chapter to get any kind of major grant from a state or anyone to do some of this work, and I love that model. And I was at a meeting with the CEO of CSTA yesterday, and I mentioned, I was like, hey, we have a model here where the chapters can lead, they can own their own communities, they can build their own ecosystems, and that's really, really powerful. I also want to talk about sort of so I have a degree in communications in German, and no longer fluent in German, it's been a number of years, but I'm not an engineer, and oftentimes people are like, well, how did you get into the STEM thing, or what are you doing? And I was one of those kids that math for me in high school and middle school was really disjointed. I went to a lot of different schools, had a very inconsistent upbringing, and I remember leaving middle school, they were like, you need to take remedial, long division when you get to high school, and I'm like, no, I want to shoot myself, this is horrible. So I took algebra, I rebelled and took algebra, and I remember my algebra teacher, I was like, oh, this is so logical, this makes total sense, this is so easy. And it was because I had a really good teacher that made it that for me. And then I went through high school, and I had all these dreams of being in advertising and architecture. I was interested in architecture. And I went to Lewis and Clark, and that's where I got hit by the feminism bug, because I took this Rhetoric of Women course from Dr. Jean Ward, and I learned about all these women that I had never heard of. I'm like, how am I a sophomore in college and I've never heard these women's names or really understood what they had contributed to history or to our world, and that's kind of criminal. And I called my sister who was in high school. I'm like, go to Mr. Hoffa's office and tell him you want to know. I gave her a list. I'm like, who are all these women? How come I'm not learning about them? And he said, well, we can do a unit on presidents' wives. And so that made me mad, right? That made me mad. And so then my senior year, I had to take, how you have to take 2 science classes to graduate college. So I had taken Rocks for Jocks previously, and that's not the actual name, but that's what everyone called it. I think it was a geology or something. And then I took Physiology of Nutrition from Dr. Janice Lochner. And I was senior, I had senioritis. I'm like, just gotta get out of here. So on the first day, I went up to go ask her to let me take it pass-fail. And the first thing she says is, I don't let anyone take my class pass-fail, don't bother asking me. And I'm like, oh, crap. And so I turned out to be one of the best students in that class. She asked me to mentor other students. I could probably repeat for you the entire, Krebs cycle. Everything she taught, it just clicked with me. And 3 years ago, I was invited to be on a panel with her about women in STEM at Lewis and Clark. And it was just so great. And I told her, I was like, you were my teacher in 1991 that made me realize that I could actually do this kind of stuff. So I think how are we doing? I probably was meant to be a mechanical engineer. Yay! But as it turns out, my brother's an industrial designer, my sister's a chemical engineer, my mother and father were both total makers who made everything in our lives. And so instead I've decided that it's my calling to manufacture engineers instead of be an engineer myself. So that is what I've been doing for the last 10 to 15 years. And prior to going to the White House, which I've only been there a month, I was Chief Strategy Officer of the National Center for Women in IT. So if you've heard of the Aspirations in Computing program for girls, if you've heard of the Tecnolochicas campaign on Univision for Latinas, those were some of my projects. And prior to that, I was Girl Scouts of the USA and doing robotics and all kinds of programs with them. So now we have slides. We're excited? Yes, and I have a slide person. Okay. So this is me, and I'm going to give these slides to Joe so that you don't have to worry about all the links and things. They're very long government links. Also can't use Bitly, so maybe we can. I haven't figured it all out yet. But go back one. I just want to clarify something about computer science for all. So I have joined the the White House to focus on tech inclusion. My title is Senior Policy Advisor for Tech Inclusion. And computer science for all really does mean for all. And that's why I'm there, and that's what my focus is, and that equity has to be a foundational part of how we do this. If we do this wrong, it's wrong for a really long time. It's been wrong for a really long time. So more of the same and a bigger amount of what we've been doing is not going to get us equity. We need to think really strategically and creatively, and we're very smart people, but this has to be a foundational thing. So one thing I want to say about equity is there are 3 critical components if you kind of break it down in your head. Everybody talks about diversity. Diversity is really just the measurement of who's in your room, right? It's a numeric measurement, who's in the room. Access is who has keys to that room. Who can get to that room, who has the transportation or the social capital, all the things that it takes to get into the room. And then inclusion, which I think is the most critical part, is who feels welcome in the room. Right? You can have all the spaces and classes in the world, but if a child of color or a low-income student or a girl doesn't feel like they belong there or have microaggressions and things that push them out, they're not going to stay and thrive. So you have to look at all those components, and it's not just an issue of counting and inputs, it's an issue of the entire environment and the way you talk. And so you may have seen there's some uproar over a conference in Vegas, big tech conference sponsored by big tech companies, that at their opening door had a Ferris wheel of women in bikinis as like a decoration. And you cannot tell me that you value the contributions of women as engineers and colleagues when you put half-naked women on a Ferris wheel to rotate at the entrance of your conference. Like, those things are happening not during the Mad Men era, they're happening yesterday. So this is something that is critical that we have to change across not just K-12, but all the way through the system. There's no point in creating a whole bunch of kids that go into a system that's going to spit them right out. So I can talk about that stuff all day long, but I know you want to hear about other stuff. So as you probably know, in January, President Obama announced computer science for all. This was really, I know, and Joanna knows, there's been years of work that have gone into getting to the point where the president stood up to the entire world and said computer science is a priority for this country, it has to happen. And it was a pretty big deal, and there's a video online you can watch. STEM education. 9 new states have since January passed legislation that computer science either counts for math or science, or is a priority for their state for funding or focus. Some major cities and states have said they're going to do it for everyone. So Chicago is requiring every student to take a computer science class. New York City has stepped up, which, you know, New York City is arguably as big as many, or bigger than many states in terms of their capacity and size. And then Arkansas, the governor of Arkansas has said this is critical and we're going to do something about this. And you think about that from a competitiveness standpoint, right? If your state has the people to hire, that's where the companies are going to be and locate. So Arkansas is like, hey, we're going to do this thing, and they are really committed to it. So Rhode Island is also moving forward with a national commitment. So that's something I'd like Oregon to think about. We can talk about that in a second. 27 governors have written a letter to Congress to ask for them to pass some funding for computer science. So we had 400 million social media hits on CS for All. So use the hashtag, and it's 4, not the number 4. 30 states now count computer science towards high school graduation. When I was chair of Computer Science Education Week in 2012, it was 9, 10 states. Like I said, 100 commitments. We have a new AP course rolling out nationwide called CS Principles that's available, and that is a course grounded in principles of equity. You probably know the previous AP course was pretty much just Java, and CS Principles is more broad. There's also Exploring Computer Science with AP course that helps kids who haven't come in with a lot of home access and preparatory privilege. And Joanna can tell you all about that. It's like sweeping the nation, and it's one of the really vetted approaches that has been proven by research to work for underrepresented kids. Looks like we're gonna have 25,000 teachers trained in various ways across the nation, and we have a bipartisan bill into Congress for $250 million. So a lot of progress made in 6 months just by putting that postcard up and saying this is important.